My name is Marina Caldwell. I'm 37 years old. And I didn't know my marriage was about to turn into a public trial until my husband made my family the jury. It was Christmas Eve at my parents' place in Gilbert, the same house that always smelled like cinnamon and roasted ham this time of year. The same house my mom transformed into something between a Hallmark set and a fire hazard. Lights on every railing, candles in every corner, garlands so thick you could lose a small child inside them. Everyone was there. My brother Drew and his wife. My sister Tessa with her 3 kids tearing through wrapping paper like tiny tornadoes. Aunts and uncles. My dad trying to pretend he didn't enjoy the chaos, while quietly refilling everyone's drinks like the calm center of the storm. And then there was Taryn, my husband. Taryn Hale, 36, the man I'd known since college, the man I'd dated for 3 years, married at 25, bought a home with in Chandler, planned a someday baby with, like it was a promise we'd cash in later when life was less busy. For 12 years, we were the couple people pointed at and said, "That's what stable looks like." And maybe that's why it took me so long to admit something had been wrong. The last few months had carried that quiet, crawling feeling, like a draft slipping under a door you swear is closed. Nothing I could grab and label, just off. Taryn said work was insane. He said quotas, end-of-year pressure, conference calls, late meetings. Normal enough. Except lately he'd shower the second he walked through the door, like he needed to rinse something invisible off his skin. His phone never left his hand. Face down on tables, locked. And when I asked simple questions, how was your day? Who was that? He'd answer like I'd accused him of murder. So I told myself what people always tell themselves when the truth is too ugly to hold. Stress, burnout, a phase. Christmas Eve was supposed to reset us. Family, food, tradition, a safe place to breathe. But from the moment we arrived, Taryn was glued to his phone like it was an IV line. He stood near the corner of my parents' living room, thumb moving nonstop, jaw tight. The glow of the screen lit his face in a way I didn't like. Sharp, anxious, almost rehearsing something. I tried to catch his eye once, twice. When he finally looked up, his expression didn't soften the way it used to. It flickered, like he'd forgotten, for half a second, that I was supposed to be on his side. Then he looked away and went back to typing. Across the room, my uncle launched into one of his political rants, and I did what I always did. Nursed my soda, nodded politely, tried not to get pulled into a fight that would ruin the mood. That's when I noticed it. Around 8 o'clock p.m., Taryn stopped texting. Just stopped. He set his phone down on his knee and stared straight ahead like he'd been unplugged. Not crying, not shaking, just staring at nothing with an expression I couldn't read. A cold line ran down my spine, the kind that doesn't feel like fear at first. More like your body recognizing danger before your mind catches up. Tessa noticed before I did. Of course she did. Tessa had always been the emotional first responder in our family. If someone's smile twitched, she'd treat it like a 5-alarm fire. She crossed the room and sat down beside him, her voice soft. "You okay, hun?" Taryn didn't look at her. He just shook his head once. And then his eyes filled. My mother saw it and immediately started drifting over, that worried mom face, already forming like she'd been waiting for her moment. My dad stayed in his chair, watching like he always did, quiet, careful, collecting details before jumping into the mess. I was across the room talking to Drew about work when I saw the shift. Tessa's arm slid around Taryn's shoulders. Taryn's hand rose to his face, covering his mouth like he was trying to hold something in. Conversation started fading. People noticed. The room tilted the way it does when a party becomes a scene. My stomach tightened. Taryn, please don't do this here, I thought. Whatever this is, don't do it here. Taryn took a breath, then another. And then he stood. Tessa stood with him, still holding his arm like she was bracing him for impact. My mother hovered close, eyes wide, already half crying. Taryn's hands were shaking. "I need to say something," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The room went silent anyway, like everyone sensed instinctively that whatever came next would ruin the night. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for a week," Taryn continued, swallowing hard. "I didn't want to ruin Christmas. I didn't want to do this in front of everyone. But I can't keep quiet anymore." My heart started pounding, not because I knew what he was going to say, because I didn't, but because of the way he said it. Not like a man confessing, like a man presenting a case. "Taryn?" I started, stepping forward. "Maybe we should talk privately." "No," he cut me off, sharper now. "No, Marina, I'm done doing this privately." The room seemed to shrink. My mother's mouth opened in a silent gasp. Tessa's grip tightened around his arm, her eyes already turning toward me, like she was preparing to protect him from me. I've been making excuses for months, Taryn said, voice breaking in a way that sounded practiced. Convincing myself I was imagining things, that I was just stressed, that I was being paranoid. He lifted his phone in his trembling hand. I even went to the doctor, he continued, and his eyes glistened as he looked around the room, because I started having symptoms and I thought maybe it was something wrong with me. My throat went dry. Symptoms? Taryn's gaze snapped back to me, and something in it made my stomach drop. The doctor ran tests, he said, voice rising, standard tests, and the results came back Thursday. He paused, and the silence stretched so tight it felt like it would snap. Then he said it. Herpes. The word hit the room like a glass thrown against a wall. Gasps. Murmurs. My mother actually stumbled backward. Taryn's voice shook as he pointed the phone toward his chest, not showing anyone the screen, just holding it like a weapon. I have herpes, he said louder, and I've been with exactly one person for 15 years, my wife. Every head turned toward me, like I was suddenly contaminated. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt too big for my mouth. Tessa stepped forward immediately, planting herself closer to Taryn like a shield. My mother's eyes filled with tears, already, instantly, and she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. My dad stood up slowly, face unreadable. I forced air into my lungs. Taryn, I said, voice shaking, I haven't... Liar, he snapped, and then his voice climbed into a shout. Now you're a liar on top of everything else. He started listing things, and with every sentence my mind scrambled, because he was using pieces of our life like evidence. All those late nights you said you were running errands. All those weekends you needed space. All those times you were too tired to even look at me. I stared at him, stunned, because those weren't even real. They were distortions, twisted reflections of normal moments, now framed like proof of betrayal. I haven't cheated on you, I said, louder now. I have not cheated. Then how did I get it? My mother choked out, already crying. Marina, how? I don't know, I said, panicking, shaking my head. But it wasn't from me. Taryn laughed, bitter, broken, triumphant. I kept quiet because I loved you, he said, voice cracking as he pressed a hand to his chest. I kept making excuses, and this is what I get? A disease I'll have for the rest of my life? The room swam. I looked around for one face, one person, to anchor me. Drew looked confused, but silent. Tessa looked furious. My mother looked devastated. My dad was still watching. Calm, measured. He finally spoke, cutting through the hysteria like a blade. Everyone needs to take a breath, he said. This is a serious accusation. We need facts, not emotions. Thank God. But Tessa whipped toward him like he'd betrayed her. He has test results, she snapped. What more facts do you need? My dad's voice stayed steady. A test result proves he's sick. It doesn't prove how it happened. Taryn's eyes widened, offended, like my father was daring to question his performance. Are you saying I'm lying? Taryn demanded, voice shrill. Are you seriously defending her right now? I'm saying, my dad replied, controlled, we should understand the full situation before we destroy someone's life. But the room didn't hear it that way. Taryn turned toward me then, walked right up until he was inches from my face. His eyes were wet, his mouth trembled, and for a split second, just a split second, he whispered, low enough that only I could hear, How could you? Then his hand moved, a hard, sharp crack across my face. The sound was louder than it should have been, like it was designed to echo. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned instantly, heat blooming under my skin. And the worst part wasn't the slap. It was the silence after. The frozen room. The way no one rushed to me. The way Tessa immediately wrapped herself around him like he was the one in danger. You can't stay here, Tessa said to him, glaring at me like I was a criminal. Come to my place. You shouldn't be anywhere near her. My mother nodded through tears. Yes, go with Tessa. You need to be safe. Safe. From me. Taryn grabbed his coat, his phone, his righteous grief. I need to go, he said, voice shaking again, perfectly. I need to leave. And then he walked out with my sister, holding him up like he'd been wounded in battle. I stood in my parents' living room, cheek on fire, heart pounding so hard it hurt, watching my family stare at me like I'd become someone else. My dad stepped closer and lowered his voice. You need to get tested tomorrow, he said quietly. Get proof, one way or the other. I swallowed, tasting metal. I will, I whispered. He nodded once, grim. Because right now, everyone thinks you're guilty. And as I stood there, breathing through the humiliation, one thought slid through my mind, cold and clear, like a knife finding its way between ribs. This felt too timed, too clean, too practiced, like he'd been waiting for the right audience. And Christmas Eve just happened to be perfect. I drove home alone that night with my cheeks still burning. Not just from the slap, from the fact that it happened in a room full of people who were supposed to love me, people who didn't even ask, Marina, what's your side? The streetlights blurred past my windshield like I was underwater. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other pressed lightly to my face, as if touching the skin could confirm it had actually happened. I'd been embarrassed before. I'd been hurt before, but I'd never felt erased. When I walked into our house in Chandler, the air felt wrong, too still, too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. His shoes were still by the entryway. His jacket still hung on the hook. But the space he usually filled, his noise, his casual presence, was gone. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like I'd stepped into the aftermath of an explosion and my brain was still trying to understand what had blown up. I locked the door behind me. Then I locked it again, double-checking. Deadbolt, chain. Only when the house was secured did I finally let my shoulders drop. And then I stood there in the hallway, staring at nothing, listening to my own breathing like it belonged to someone else. Herpes. The word looped in my head like a siren. I had never cheated on him. Not once. Not emotionally. Not physically. Not even in the tiny ways people excuse as harmless. Taryn was my husband, my person, the man I built my adult life around. So how did we end up here? How did we end up in a living room where my sister called him safe and me dangerous? I went to the bathroom mirror and looked at my face. A red mark had already risen along my cheekbone. 5 fingerprints, clear as a stamp. My throat tightened, not because of pain, because of the memory of the room watching him do it, watching me take it, like it was deserved. I turned the faucet on and splashed water on my face, then sat on the edge of the bathtub, hands shaking. That's when my brain did what it always does when something unbearable happens. It tried to build a story where it didn't. It tried to find an explanation that didn't involve the man I loved intentionally setting me on fire. Maybe a medical mix-up, I thought, grasping at anything. 6 months earlier, I'd had gallbladder surgery. Routine, in-and-out procedure, but still. Hospitals use needles, blood draws, IV lines, equipment. It sounded ridiculous. Even thinking it made me feel desperate. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was that Taryn knew he was guilty and decided I'd be the one who paid for it. I went to bed alone that night, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tessa's face turned hard with hatred, my mother crying like I'd murdered someone, and Taryn's eyes, wet, wounded, performing. I kept replaying the moment right before he slapped me. The whisper. How could you? He'd said it like a line, like a cue, like he wanted the room to believe the slap wasn't violence. It was justice. By morning, my body felt like it had been wrung out, but I didn't have the luxury of collapsing. My dad's words looped in my head. You need facts to fight this. So I got them. I drove to an urgent care clinic in Scottsdale right after sunrise, the kind tucked between a nail salon and a smoothie place, where the fluorescent lights always made everyone look sick. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and cheap coffee. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down the hall like I was walking to a verdict. She asked what brought me in. I took a breath. I need a full STD panel. She blinked, then softened with that careful professional sympathy that never feels neutral. Any symptoms? She asked. No. My voice came out too quick, too sharp. I just need to know. She nodded like she'd heard that sentence 1,000 times. Blood draw, urine sample, swab, the works. The nurse slapped labels on tubes while making small talk in a voice that didn't match the heaviness in my chest. Results in 3 to 5 business days, she said. Sometimes sooner. 3 to 5 days. It felt like 3 to 5 years. Because those results didn't just determine my health. They determined whether I'd be able to look my family in the eyes again. Whether my name could be repaired. Whether my marriage was salvageable or already dead. When I got home, my phone was buzzing. 5 texts from Taryn. Taryn, we need to talk about finances. Taryn, I need access to your account for medical expenses. Taryn, you owe me at least that much after what you did. Taryn, are you seriously going to ignore me? Taryn, I need money. I stared at the messages until the screen dimmed. There it was. Not pain, not heartbreak. Logistics. Like he'd already moved past the betrayal and into the settlement phase. Like he'd already decided I was guilty, and now I needed to pay restitution. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I sent, me. Wait for my test results, then we'll talk. His response came fast. Taryn, so you're just going to leave me hanging? Leave me to deal with this alone? I laughed, but the sound was ugly. You left me. You slapped me. You let my family crucify me. I typed back. Me. You're staying at Tessa's. Deal with it. My phone rang immediately. Taryn. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. I put my phone face down on the counter. Something he'd always done. The irony almost made me choke. Day 1 of waiting for results crawled by. Day 2 crawled slower. I couldn't focus. Every room in the house felt like it carried an echo of him. Like if I turned too fast, I'd see him standing there, looking wounded, telling everyone I ruined his life. I kept imagining my mom telling relatives. I kept imagining Tessa telling her friends. I kept imagining the story spreading like smoke. Marina cheated. Marina gave her husband an STD. Marina got caught. And I had nothing to fight it with except my own word. By late afternoon on day 2, I was sitting on the couch scrolling mindlessly. News, weather, anything. But I wasn't reading. I was listening, waiting for the sound of my phone. Waiting for the results. Waiting for my life to either collapse or finally stop collapsing. That's when my phone rang from an unknown number. For a second, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But something in me, something cold and alert, made me swipe. Hello? Silence for a beat. Then a man's voice, shaky, strained, like he'd been crying. Is this Marina? Marina Caldwell? Yes, I said slowly. Who is this? My name is Jeremy, he said. I'm Adriana's husband. The name meant nothing at first. Then my brain caught up. Adriana. A coworker. A woman. Someone from Taryn's world. My grip tightened on the phone. Okay. Jeremy swallowed hard. I'm sorry to call like this. I don't even know how to say this without sounding insane, but I just got test results back. My breath hitched. And I have herpes, he said. Everything in me went cold. Jeremy's voice cracked. And I know exactly how I got it, because my wife has been cheating on me. My heart started pounding again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was something sharper, something awake. With your husband, Jeremy finished. The room tilted. I put my hand on the coffee table to steady myself. What? I whispered. I found everything, he said quickly, like he was afraid I'd hang up. Texts, hotel receipts, photos, a burner email account. It's been going on for 6 months. 6 months. My mouth went dry. 6 months of late meetings. 6 months of showers. 6 months of defensiveness. 6 months of him turning his phone over like it contained a bomb. Your husband gave my wife an STD, Jeremy said, voice thick with disgust. And she gave it to me. And now, I'm pretty sure, you deserve to know what kind of man you're married to. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. Taryn. My husband. The man who'd stood in my parents' living room and called me a liar. The man who'd looked at me with wet eyes and told everyone I destroyed him. He'd been cheating, and he'd blamed me. My voice came out low. He accused me on Christmas Eve. Jeremy made a sound, half laugh, half choke. Of course he did, he said bitterly. That's what cheaters do. They flip the script. They make themselves the victim before you can prove they're the villain. My skin prickled. It was like hearing someone say the exact thought I'd been afraid to voice. Jeremy exhaled shakily. I'm calling because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. I know what it feels like to have your life detonated by someone you trusted. I'm so sorry. He paused. Can I send you what I have? Yes, I said immediately. Too fast. Send it. A second later, my phone buzzed. Screenshots. Dozens. Messages between Taryn and Adriana. Not subtle, not innocent, not explainable. Hotel confirmations. Photos. Timestamps lining up with every conference call and late meeting and work trip he'd claimed. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Not because I couldn't read it. Because I could. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. Jeremy kept talking, but his voice faded behind the roar in my head. Taryn didn't accuse me because he was hurt. He accused me because he was guilty. He didn't slap me because he lost control. He slapped me because he needed the room to believe he was the one who'd been betrayed. And my family, my own blood, had handed him that power without hesitation. When the call finally ended, I sat there in silence, phone heavy in my lap, my living room suddenly too bright. I looked at the screenshots again, and again. Each one felt like another nail. By the time I reached the last message, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even surprised. I was calm in a way that scared me, because the fear, the uncertainty that had been eating me alive for 2 days was gone. Now I had something else. Something colder, a truth sharp enough to cut, and a question that began forming like thunder at the back of my throat. How far is he willing to go to protect himself? Because if he could do that on Christmas Eve, what else could he do next? By the time day 3 rolled around, I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't pacing, I wasn't checking my phone every 10 minutes. I wasn't rehearsing explanations in my head. I already knew the truth. The only thing left was to see how far Taryn would go when the mask finally came off. Late afternoon, I was standing in the kitchen staring at nothing when I heard tires on the driveway. Slow, deliberate. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. I felt it in my chest first. That familiar tightening. The same one I'd felt when he stood up in my parents' living room. I watched him through the front window anyway. Taryn stepped out of his car like he still owned the place. Same jacket. Same posture. Like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't publicly branded me a cheater 2 nights earlier. For a second, I considered not answering. Let him knock, let him sweat. But then I thought, no, enough waiting. I opened the door before he could raise his hand. He blinked, clearly surprised I'd answered so fast, then immediately slipped into righteous outrage. "We need to talk," he said, stepping forward. I didn't move. "We're talking," I replied flatly. He frowned. "Are you seriously going to block me from my own house?" I met his eyes. "You lost the right to call it that when you slapped me." His jaw tightened. "I didn't want to do that. You pushed me." "Careful," I said quietly. "You're already on thin ice." That stopped him. Just for a second. He exhaled dramatically and walked past me anyway, dropping his keys on the counter like punctuation. "I've been calling you all day," he said. "The hospital keeps calling me. The meds are expensive, and you're just acting like none of this matters." He turned toward me, eyes blazing. "This is your responsibility too." There it was. Not remorse, not guilt, an invoice. "Sit down," I said. "Don't tell me what to do," he snapped. "I'm not sitting until you transfer money. I shouldn't be dealing with this alone." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just said it again, slower this time. "Sit down." Something in my tone finally cut through his momentum. Not anger, not volume. Control. His mouth opened like he was about to argue, then closed. He lowered himself onto the couch, suddenly wary. Good. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and unlocked it. I didn't rush. I wanted the silence to work on him. Then I said it. "I know about Adriana." The color drained from his face so fast it was almost impressive. "What?" he said too quickly. "Adriana," I repeated calmly. "Your coworker. Married, brown hair, regional travel, hotels instead of conferences." He laughed, short, forced. "I don't know what you're talking about." I tapped my phone and turned the screen toward him. The first screenshot glowed between us. A text message, his name, her words. He stared. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. "I talked to her husband," I continued, voice steady. "Jeremy, he has herpes. He found everything. 6 months worth." I scrolled. Hotel receipts. Photos. Dates lining up perfectly with every excuse he'd ever fed me. "You cheated," I said. "You caught an STD from your affair partner, and then you stood in front of my family and accused me to cover your own ass." His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing came out. For the first time since Christmas Eve, there was no performance. No tears on cue. Just panic. I don't," he stammered. "That's not—" "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult me by lying again." His shoulders slumped. Then, finally, he cried. Not the cinematic, wounded tears he'd unleashed in my parents' living room. These were messy, desperate, real. "It was a mistake," he said, rubbing his face with both hands. "It just happened. I didn't plan for any of this." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. "A 6-month mistake?" I asked. "That's impressive." "I panicked," he said, voice cracking. "When I found out about the test, I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. I thought if I didn't act first." "So you destroyed me," I finished. "You humiliated me. You let my family turn on me." He looked up at me then, eyes red. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "But it did," I said, "and you didn't stop it." Silence fell heavy between us. Then he straightened slightly, like he remembered something. "You don't even have your results yet," he said, trying to regain ground. "What if you gave it to me first?" I stared at him, slowly, carefully. "You're still trying," I said quietly, "even now." He swallowed. "I said sit down earlier," I continued, "but this conversation is over." I stood up. He panicked immediately. "Wait, Marina, please, we can work through this. People get past worse things." I walked past him toward the bedroom. He followed. "Listen to me," he said, voice rising. "We built a life together. 12 years doesn't just disappear." I opened the closet and started pulling his clothes off the hangers. Shirts, pants, jackets. The sound of plastic and metal hitting the floor filled the room. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Cleaning," I replied. I grabbed garbage bags from under the sink. Dresses, shoes, his stupid collection of motivational notebooks, into the bags they went. "You can't just kick me out," he yelled. "I'm not," I said, tying a bag shut. "I'm removing trash from my property." He lunged forward and grabbed one of the bags. "Stop it!" I yanked it back hard enough that he stumbled. "Touch me or my things again," I said coldly, and I call the police." His face twisted. "You're insane," he spat. "You're a psycho." I smiled. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what you called me without using the word." I carried the bags down the hallway, out at the front door, and dumped them on the porch. 1, 2, 3. Each thud felt like punctuation. Behind me, he stood in the bedroom doorway, shaking, mascara streaking down his face like he'd melted. "You're really doing this?" he whispered. I turned. "You're really just realizing that?" I grabbed his toiletry bag from the bathroom. The cheap cologne he loved, the razor, the pills. I tossed it onto the pile. "I hope you get it," he hissed suddenly, venom cutting through the tears. "I hope your test comes back positive so you understand what I'm going through." I froze. Then I turned slowly. There it was. The real him. I smiled, not warm, not kind. "There it is," I said softly. "Took long enough." I grabbed the last bag and held the door open. "Out." "I hate you," he said, voice breaking. "Good," I replied. "That makes 2 of us." He walked out, shoulders heaving. I locked the door behind him. Deadbolt, chain. He banged on it. Once, twice. Then begged. Then screamed. I didn't answer. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a soda, and opened it. The sound of the can popping felt louder than it should have. By the time the banging stopped and his car finally peeled out of the driveway, my hands weren't shaking anymore. Because whatever my test results said, one thing was already clear. My marriage was over, and I was done protecting a man who tried to destroy me to save himself. The clinic called the next morning. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee untouched, staring at the quiet like it might accuse me of something if I looked away. When my phone buzzed with the urgent care number, my heart still jumped, even though I already knew the truth about Taryn. Health fear doesn't disappear just because betrayal shows its face. "Marina Caldwell?" the nurse asked. "Yes. We have your test results." I closed my eyes. "Everything came back negative," she said. "All clear." For a second, I couldn't speak. Relief didn't wash over me gently. It crashed. Hard. Violent. Like my body had been holding its breath for days, and finally remembered how to inhale. I thanked her, hung up, and sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet. I didn't cry. I laughed once. Short, breathless, almost hysterical. Not because it was funny, because the final piece had clicked into place. Taryn didn't just accuse me while guilty. He accused me knowing I was clean, knowing I'd done nothing wrong, knowing the truth would come out eventually, and trying to burn my reputation down before it did. I took a photo of the results and saved it. Then I sent it to Jeremy. He replied almost immediately. "Jeremy, congratulations." Jeremy, now don't let him rewrite reality. I didn't plan to. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer. Her name was Elaine Porter, mid-50s, sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. The kind of woman who listened without interrupting, then dismantled your problem like a mechanic tearing down an engine. I laid everything out. The screenshots, the hotel receipts, the STD accusation, the slap, the text demanding money, and finally, the prenup. Elaine flipped through the documents, lips pursed. "This," she said finally, tapping the page, "is a gift." Taryn had hated the prenup. Back when we were engaged, he'd called it cold, said it meant I didn't trust him, said I was planning for failure instead of believing in love. I'd stood my ground anyway. It protected what each of us brought into the marriage. Nothing unfair, nothing sneaky. He'd signed it, reluctantly, 2 months before the wedding, probably assuming he'd talk me out of it later. Elaine smiled thinly. "Adultery, defamation, public humiliation, fraudulent accusations," she said. "And a valid prenup? This is generous of him." "So I won't be destroyed?" I asked quietly. She looked up at me. "No, but he's about to be." We filed that same day. Irreconcilable differences. Adultery. Enforcement of prenuptial agreement. Taryn was served at Tessa's house. According to the voicemail she left me, screaming, incoherent, calling me a monster, he'd had a full breakdown. Good. 2 days later, his lawyer filed a countermotion. They claimed the prenup was signed under duress, that I controlled the finances, that Taryn deserved 50-50 assets and spousal support, that the STD accusation was private medical information and irrelevant. Elaine laughed when she read it. "They're reaching," she said, "and judges hate reaching." Discovery was brutal. Every message with Adriana came out. Every hotel receipt, every fraudulent expense report labeled client dinner. The timeline lined up perfectly. Christmas Eve became a centerpiece. Witness statements from my family, descriptions of the accusation, descriptions of the slap. Elaine framed it perfectly. This wasn't an emotional outburst, she argued. This was a calculated attempt to control the narrative and destroy my client's credibility before the truth surfaced. Taryn's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, controlling, cold. But documents don't care about tone, and facts don't flinch when feelings get loud. While the legal war unfolded, I did something else. I told my family. I created a group message, attached everything. The screenshots, the hotel receipts, the affair timeline, my clean test results. No commentary, no insults. Just evidence. My mom called first. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I should have believed you. I should have waited for facts." "Yes," I said calmly. "You should have." There was silence on the line. "I need space," I added. "I can't pretend this didn't happen." Tessa called next. "You can't seriously blame us," she said defensively. "He seemed so genuine. He was hurting." "He was lying," I replied, "and you didn't even ask for my side." "That's not fair." "When was the last time," I interrupted quietly, "you waited for facts before deciding who the villain was?" She hung up. My dad called later that night. "You okay?" he asked. "As okay as someone can be," I said. "I believed you," he said softly, "from the start." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." He paused, then said, "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. "I'm divorcing your mother." The word landed heavy. "What?" I asked. "Christmas Eve locked it in," he said. "I can't live with someone who treats emotions like evidence. Not anymore." He didn't sound angry. He sounded finished. And in that moment, I realized something bigger than my marriage was unraveling. This wasn't just about Taryn. It was about people who burned others alive based on how they felt and called it justice. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was just done letting lies scream louder than truth. My dad didn't rush his divorce. He didn't scream, he didn't threaten, he didn't dramatize it. He just disengaged, which I learned quickly was far more terrifying to my mother than anger ever could have been. Over the next few weeks, I watched my parents' marriage unwind the way old fabric does, quietly, threads giving way one by one until you realize there's nothing holding it together anymore. Dad moved out first, not in a dramatic storm out, just a suitcase, a few boxes, like someone checking out of a hotel they'd overstayed by decades. He called me the night he signed the lease on a condo in Scottsdale. "I should have done this years ago," he admitted. "I just didn't know how." I understood. I was learning that lesson myself. While my family realigned in uncomfortable, permanent ways, Taryn's life began collapsing in public. It started with his job. The same pharmaceutical company that had once praised him as a rising star suddenly found itself very interested in expense reports tied to Adriana. Hotel rooms billed as client meetings, flights marked as conference travel that conveniently overlapped, meals for two, no clients present. The internal audit didn't take long. Both Taryn and Adriana were placed on administrative leave. 2 weeks later, they were offered identical deals: resign quietly, receive 3 months severance, avoid a formal fraud investigation. Adriana took it immediately. Taryn hesitated, then took it too. By the time word spread, the narrative had already flipped. People who'd once believed his Christmas Eve performance started asking uncomfortable questions. Funny how the truth does that. Meanwhile, Jeremy's divorce went nuclear. He had everything: the affair, the STD diagnosis, the burner email account. The judge asked their kids, 13 and 15, if they wanted to see their mother. They said no, not angrily. Matter of fact, they didn't want to live with someone who lied to their faces. Jeremy got primary custody. Adriana got supervised visitation, if the kids agreed. They never did. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Tempe. Career stalled, reputation shredded. And Taryn? He spiraled faster. Without his job, the money dried up. Without money, his lawyer's strategy collapsed. Without credibility, the court lost patience. When our divorce finally reached judgment in April, the courtroom was painfully quiet. No drama, no speeches, just consequences. The judge read the decision slowly, methodically. The prenup was valid. Adultery was proven. Defamation was documented. Taryn received his personal belongings and his retirement account. That was it. No house, no spousal support, no shared savings. He sat there while the judge spoke, shoulders slumped, eyes red, finally understanding that no performance could save him anymore. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Just distance. Like I was watching someone else's storm pass from behind thick glass. Outside the courtroom, his lawyer tried one last angle, claimed the STD issue was private, that public exposure had damaged Tehran emotionally. The judge shut it down. Your client engaged in a sustained extramarital affair. she said coolly. He contracted an STD from his affair partner and then publicly accused his wife to deflect responsibility. The court will not reward that behavior. That was the end of it. At home, my mom's divorce moved forward too. She begged, she cried, she accused Dad of abandoning her. He didn't budge. In mediation, he said something that later made its way back to me through a relative. I've spent 40 years managing her emotions. When she condemned our daughter without facts, I realized that would never stop. I'm done. The house was sold. Mom couldn't afford it alone anyway. She moved in with Tessa. Two emotionally reactive people under one roof. I gave it 6 months. Dad's new place was quiet, minimalist, clean. The first time I visited, he looked lighter, like someone who'd finally set something heavy down. "You okay?" he asked me, handing me a soda. "I am," I said, surprised to realize it was true. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, life wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about rebuilding. But just when I thought the fallout was over, I heard the doorbell ring. 2 years later, on New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve arrived quietly. No parties, no countdown plans. Just my dad and me on the couch, a game playing in the background, the kind of calm that only comes after you've survived something that tried to break you. My life wasn't flashy, but it was peaceful. And after everything, peace felt like wealth. Dad had come over early, carrying takeout and his usual dry commentary on whatever team was losing. We'd settled into an easy rhythm. Shared silence, occasional jokes, the comfortable kind of closeness that didn't demand anything. Around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. Dad looked at me. "You expecting someone?" "Nope." I stood, already uneasy in a way I couldn't explain, and walked to the door. The second I opened it, I knew. Terrence stood on my porch. He looked smaller. Not just thinner, though he was at least 30 pounds lighter, but diminished. Like life had wrung him out and left him hollow. His hair was pulled back badly. Dark circles sat under his eyes like bruises. His clothes hung on him, worn, outdated, like remnants from a life he no longer fit into. "Hey," he said softly. I didn't move aside. "Can I come in?" "No." His mouth tightened. "Please, just for a minute. I need to talk to you." Dad appeared behind me, arms crossed. "Who is it?" he asked. I didn't take my eyes off Taryn. He was just leaving. Taryn's face went pale when he saw my dad. 5 minutes, Taryn pleaded. "On the porch." I hesitated, not out of sympathy, out of curiosity. 5, I said. "That's it." We stepped outside. Dad stayed just inside the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching silently. The second the door closed behind us, Taryn collapsed emotionally. Real crying this time. Ugly, desperate. "I messed up," he said, voice breaking. "I know I messed up. I've lost everything." I waited. "My job's gone," he continued. "My apartment's gone. I'm staying with my cousin in Tempe. I can barely afford my medication. My credit's destroyed. I have nothing, Marina." "Okay," I said calmly. He blinked, clearly expecting more. "That's it?" he asked. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "You made choices. These are consequences." I panicked, he said. I didn't know what else to do. "You could have told the truth," I replied. "That usually helps." He wiped his face on his sleeve. I know. I can't change that now. I can only ask you to give me another chance." I actually laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. "Another chance at what?" I asked. "At us," he said quickly. "We were good together before everything fell apart. We could be good again. I've changed. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself." "That's great," I said honestly, "but it has nothing to do with me." His face crumpled. "Please," he said. "I have nobody. Your mom won't talk to me. Tessa won't return my calls. My friends are gone. Everyone knows what I did. I'm completely alone." "Not my problem." "How can you be so cold?" he snapped. "Practice." Dad made a quiet snorting sound behind me. Taryn shot him a glare, then turned back to me. "I loved you," he said. "I still love you. 12 years has to count for something." "It did," I said, past tense. He swallowed hard. "I can't take it back," he whispered. "All I can do is ask for forgiveness. Ask for another chance. Ask you to help me get back on my feet." There it was. The real reason. "You need money," I said flatly. "I need help," he insisted. "Is that so wrong? We built a life together." "No," I cut in. "We had a life together. You burned it down. I'm not obligated to rebuild it for you." He dropped to his knees. Right there on my porch. Full breakdown. Sobbing, begging, promising anything. "I'll sign any prenup," he cried. "I'll work 3 jobs. I'll do whatever you want. I just can't do this alone anymore." I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just clarity. "Taryn," I said firmly, "get up." He didn't. I said get up. He looked up at me, mascara-streaked eyes wild. "So that's it?" he whispered. You're just going to let me suffer? You let yourself suffer when you made those choices, I replied. I'm just declining to fix it. I hope you're happy, he spat. I am, I said honestly. That one hurt him the most. He stood slowly, stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, then walked to his car, a beat-up Honda that rattled when it started. He sat there for a minute before driving away. I didn't watch. I went back inside. Dad handed me a soda without a word. Well, he said, popping the tab. That was entertaining. Cold, I replied. You know what's wild? He said. Some people burn their whole life down, then show up at your door like your customer service. I laughed. Your mom did the same thing, he added. Blew up a 30-year marriage and acted shocked when I wouldn't fix it. What did you tell her? I asked. The same thing you told him, Dad said. Your emergency stopped being my problem when you made it your choice. He raised his can. To being off the clock. I clinked mine against his. Taryn made his choices. He cheated. He lied. He tried to destroy me to save himself. And when the truth finally caught up with him, he wanted me to carry the weight. I didn't. And that finally was freedom.